This discovery changed everything. We found the virus responsible for AIDS. It's HIV. It's a breakthrough that will save millions of lives.
I was working on azithromycin, RAZ, could inhibit the replication of AIDS.
The Blood of the Innocents. Chapter 1. The Red Thread. Indiana, 1985. The air in the Miller kitchen, once thick with the comforting aroma of pot roast and lemon polish, now felt suffocating. A scent Sarah would forever brand as the last breath of the before, outside. The October leaves, once vibrant hues of paprika, now seemed to bleed onto the manicured lawns of their Kokomo cul-de-sac. Sarah's gaze, drawn to the window, found her 10-year-old son, Leo. He was a blur of motion, a baseball bat, a fierce extension of his small frame, slicing through the air with a sound that once brought her joy, but now echoed with a hollow finality. To the world, he was a boy playing. To Sarah, he was a fragile miracle, a testament to science that felt increasingly precarious. Leo, her brave little bleeder, was a walking embodiment of hemophilia A. His blood, so desperately lacking the vital factor VIII, was a betrayal. A decade ago, a simple bruise could have meant a descent into crippling pain, joint destruction, or worse. But they had the concentrate, the miracle powder, a fragile shield born from the plasma of countless strangers. It had given him the illusion of safety, the freedom to run, to jump, to simply be a boy. He's got a good swing. Tom's voice, a rumble of comfort, wrapped around her as his arms encircled her waist. His hands, permanently etched with the grease of the auto plant, were a familiar anchor. "He's got a bruise on his forearm," Sarah whispered, her eyes locked on Leo, a knot of dread tightening in her chest. "I saw it this morning. He infused yesterday, Sarah. He's fine. Let him be." Tom's words, meant to soothe, felt like a fragile dam against an encroaching tide. The phone's shrill cry shattered the fragile peace. Sarah's hands, damp with nervous sweat, fumbled with her apron as she answered. "Doctor." Eris Thorne, Leo's hematologist, a man whose calm had always been their bedrock. His voice was a tight wire, stripped of its usual warmth. "Sarah," he said, "I need you and Tom to bring Leo in, tomorrow morning, first thing. Is it his levels?" Did the assay come back low? Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, familiar drumbeat of fear. "Just come in, Sarah, please." The plea hung in the air, heavy with unspoken dread. The drive to Indianapolis was a suffocating silence. The hemophilia clinic's waiting room, usually a boisterous sanctuary of childhood resilience, was eerily hushed. A palpable tension, a static charge of fear, crackled in the air. Dr. Thorne, his face etched with a weariness that seemed to have aged him a decade, stood by the window, his gaze lost in the bleak expanse of the parking lot. He didn't retreat behind his desk. "There have been reports," he began, his voice strained, "for a few years now, about a virus affecting the gay community in coastal cities. They're calling it HTLV-3. "I've read about it," Tom murmured, his unease a physical presence. "The immune thing. But what does that have to do with Leo?" Thorne's eyes, glistening with unshed tears, met theirs. He drew a ragged breath. "The virus is bloodborne, Tom. It's in the supply. Factor VIII. The pools are contaminated. Because the product is made from thousands of donors, it only takes one infected donation to taint the entire batch." Sarah felt the world tilt, the floor dropping out from beneath her. "But you said it was safe. You said it was a miracle." "We didn't know," Thorne whispered, the words a broken confession. "We tested Leo's blood from his last visit. He's positive, Sarah." The silence that descended was a crushing weight, stealing the air from Sarah's lungs. Her gaze fell upon Leo, perched on the exam table, lost in the vibrant world of a comic book, utterly unaware that his death sentence had just been read. "What does this mean?" Sarah choked out, her voice a distant echo from the depths of a submerged world. It means, Thorne said, his voice hollow, that we wait. We don't know enough yet. But his immune system has been compromised. Winter, 1985. The news did not travel through our town like a breeze, fresh and fleeting. It moved like an infection, silent, feverish, and ruinous. It seeped under door cracks and settled into the living rooms of people we had known all our lives, turning neighbors into strangers and friends into ghosts. It began with the small, sharp cuts of silence. Sarah stood in the produce aisle, the fluorescent lights humming a headache into her temples, her hands hovering over the rough skin of a cantaloupe. She saw Mrs. Gable, the woman who played the organ at Sunday service, the woman who had knit Leo a hat when he was born freeze. Their eyes met for a fractured second before Mrs. Gable jerked her cart around, the wheels squeaking a desperate retreat, refusing to even share the same stale air. Then came the phone calls, the jarring ring in the dead of the evening, silence on the other end. Just the heavy, wet sound of breathing, or the sharp click of a receiver slamming down a cowardly act of violence delivered through a wire. But the true explosion arrived in November, under the high beams of the school gymnasium. The room was suffocatingly packed. The air was thick and sour, a soup of floor wax, anxious sweat, and the metallic taste of adrenaline. Sarah and Tom sat in the front row, isolated on an island of folding chairs. They held hands with a grip that was less about affection and more about survival. Their knuckles bleached white, anchoring each other to the floor. Leo was at home with a babysitter, spared the sight of his own community putting him on trial. "We have a duty to protect our own." The shout came from Mr. Henderson. Sarah felt the breath leave her lungs. This was the father of Leo's best friend, the man who had hosted Leo for sleepovers, who had grilled burgers for him in July. Now his face was a map of fury, veins corded in his neck like ropes. "You cannot let that boy inside the building. He isn't a student anymore. He's a biological weapon." "Mr. Henderson, please," the superintendent pleaded, his voice thin and ineffectual against the tide. "The CDC guidelines state that casual contact..." "The CDC doesn't know a damn thing." A woman shrieked from the bleachers, her voice cracking with hysteria. "They told us the blood supply was safe, didn't they? They lied, and now look where we are." Sarah stood up. Her legs felt like water, trembling violently. But she forced her chin upward, defying the gravity of their hate. "He is a child," she said. Her voice shook, but it sliced through the roar of the crowd. "He is only 10 years old. He wants to learn long division. He wants to trade sandwiches at lunch. He is not a weapon to be disarmed. He is Leo. He's a killer." A voice boomed from the back, anonymous and cruel. "He spits," another cried out, the panic rising to a fever pitch. "If he sneezes on my little girl, she's dead. Do you hear me? Dead." The fear in the room was palpable, a living, breathing beast that had swallowed them all whole. It wasn't just hatred. It was something older and darker, a primal, animal terror of the unseen. These were the same people who had crowded Sarah's kitchen with casseroles and condolences when her mother passed. Now, they looked at her not as a grieving mother, but as the carrier of a plague, a leper, to be cast out. The vote was swift, a guillotine drop. Leo was barred from Western Middle School. The verdict was delivered without mercy. He would be taught via a telephone hookup. He was to become a disembodied voice, a ghost haunting a classroom that had decided it no longer had space for his body. That night, the house felt too quiet. Sarah sat on the edge of Leo's bed, the mattress dipping under her weight. The room was dark, save for the sliver of hallway light cutting across the quilt. Leo was staring up at the ceiling, his small body utterly still. "Why can't I go back, Mom?" he asked. The softness of his voice broke her heart into pieces. "Did I do something bad?" Sarah reached out, stroking the hair back from his forehead, her fingers trembling as she fought to keep the dam of tears from bursting. How do you explain to a child that the world has decided to fear him? No, baby. No. She choked out. You didn't do a single thing wrong. People are they are terrified of things they don't understand. Leo turned his head, his eyes wide and searching in the dim light. I'm scared too, he whispered. Chapter 3. Stones and Silence. Spring, 1986. The silence that descended was a suffocating blanket, broken only by the venomous whispers of harassment. The phone, once a lifeline, now remained a dead weight, its silence a stark contrast to the venom spewed through the answering machine. Even the mailman, a familiar face, now retreated to the edge of the driveway, his shadow a fleeting specter, leaving their letters like discarded offerings. Then, a violent crash ripped through the fragile piece of their home. Glass exploded inward, a glittering rain of shards across the carpet where Leo had been lost in his world of toy soldiers moments before. Tom rushed to the window, his feet crunching on the shattered remnants of their sanctuary. A brick lay amidst the debris, a brutal testament to the hatred that had found them. Tied to it, a note, scrawled in jagged marker. Get out, AIDS freaks. Sarah sank to her knees, her hands trembling as she gathered the glass. A sharp edge bit into her finger, and a single bright drop of blood welled up. She stared at it, mesmerized. Blood. The very essence of life, now the mark of their pariah status, the symbol of their agonizing exile. We're not leaving, Tom vowed, his voice a low, dangerous growl that vibrated with a protective fury. He retrieved his hunting rifle from the closet, its cold steel a stark contrast to the warmth he usually exuded. He became a silent sentinel on the porch, a guardian against the encroaching darkness. The next day, Sarah walked into the grocery store, a desperate need for milk overriding the gnawing fear. She held her head high, a solitary island in a sea of averted gazes. As she reached the counter, Jenny, the young clerk who had once giggled while babysitting Leo, recoiled as if from a plague. I can't. Jenny stammered, her eyes wide with a fear Sarah knew all too well. The manager said, I can't touch your money. Sarah looked at the $10 bill in her hand, a flimsy shield against the world's judgment. It's paper, Jenny. It's not blood. Please, Mrs. Miller, just leave it on the counter. Don't hand it to me. With a heavy heart, Sarah placed the bill on the counter. Jenny, with a pair of tongs usually reserved for donuts, snatched it up. The humiliation seared Sarah's face, a burning acid that left her breathless. She turned and walked out, the milk forgotten, the weight of their isolation heavier than ever. Back home, Leo was changing. The vibrant spark in his eyes was dimming, replaced by a weariness that belied his 13 years. He retreated to his room for hours, the radio's static a mournful soundtrack to his fading youth. He no longer asked about his friends. He knew. He saw the way the neighbors snatched their children indoors, their faces masks of fear, when he dared to step onto the porch. He was 13, and already he was becoming a ghost. Chapter 4. The Fever Ward. 1987. The fever arrived in the dead of night, not as a guest, but as a thief. It ravaged Leo's small body, stealing his warmth and replacing it with a terrifying, radiating fire. The thermometer climbed relentlessly to 104, a number that screamed danger. Under his jaw, the lymph nodes had swollen, hard and angry, distorting the soft curve of his neck like stones trapped beneath the skin. Riley Hospital for Children ceased to be a place they visited. It became the cage where they lived. The infectious disease ward was a landscape of hushed, fearful tones, and the crinkle of yellow isolation gowns, a world wrapped in plastic. Dr. Thorne, their anchor, was gone, lost to the sterility of a research lab. In his place stood Dr. Vance, a man who treated the paperwork, not the child. He stood in the doorway, a silhouette of clinical detachment, wearing a mask and double gloves even though he was 10 feet away. He looked at Leo as if he were a specimen in a jar. "It's pneumocystis pneumonia," Vance announced, his eyes scanning the clipboard rather than the gasping boy in the bed. "A classic opportunist. We'll start pentamidine." Sarah felt the room spin. "Is he going to die?" she asked. The words tasted like ash and bile in her mouth, a question no mother should ever have to form. Vance finally looked up, his expression unreadable behind the mask. "The prognosis is poor, Mrs. Miller. You need to be realistic." He offered no hope, only cold statistics. But the nurses were the difference between a hospital and a morgue. There was Maria, a heavy-set woman with eyes full of ancient sorrow and infinite kindness. She ignored the protocol of the double gloves. She stripped them off to press her bare, cool hand against Leo's burning palm. "You hold on, mijo," she would whisper. A prayer breathed into the sterile air as she adjusted his IV. "You fight." One night, bleary-eyed and exhausted, Sarah found a young medical student hovering outside Leo's room. He looked paralyzed, staring at the door handle as if it were red-hot iron. "Go in," Sarah said, her voice raspy from the chair where she kept her vigil. The student jumped. I haven't seen one before," he admitted, his voice trembling, a patient with it. Something inside Sarah snapped a tether of patience that had been frayed for months finally broke. She stood up, shedding her exhaustion like a heavy coat. "He has a name," she hissed, stepping into the student's space. "His name is Leo. He likes Spider-Man comic books, and he cries when the Chicago Cubs lose. He is not an it. He is a little boy." Her eyes bore into him, fierce and wet with unshed tears. "And if you are going to be a doctor, you better learn right now that this virus does not jump through the air to get you. Now, get in there and check his vitals, or get out of this profession forever." Shamed, the student lowered his head and walked into the room. Sarah watched from the doorway as he reached out, his fingers trembling visibly as they touched Leo's scorching skin to find a pulse. It was a terrifying moment for him, but for Sarah, it was a victory. In this war for her son's dignity, she would fight for every inch of humanity she could get. Chapter 5. The Underground. 1990. Leo survived the pneumonia, but what was left of him was terrifyingly fragile. He was no longer her sturdy boy. He was a translucent sketch of himself. The virus wasn't just living inside him. It was devouring him, cell by agonizing cell. The FDA had offered a lifeline in AZT, a resurrected failure of a cancer drug from the 60s, but it felt less like a cure and more like a different kind of poison. It ravaged him. It turned his body into a battleground where he was always losing. Sarah would hold his forehead while he vomited until there was nothing left to expel, his body convulsing as he dry-heaved bitter, yellow bile. The drug choked his bone marrow, starving his blood, which meant more transfusions, more needles, and the terrifying roulette of infection. Every dose felt like she was feeding him arsenic to kill a monster, praying the boy survived the bait. Sarah's desperation became a physical weight, heavy and suffocating. She stopped sleeping. She stopped reading Reader's Digest and started stealing medical journals from the hospital library, hiding them under her coat like contraband. She forced her mind to wrap around a new, terrifying language: T-cells, viral loads, protease. She was drowning in data, looking for a raft. She found the lifeline on a crumpled flyer in an Indianapolis coffee shop, half hidden behind a plea for a lost tabby cat. The bold, angry letters screamed at her: "Act up, fight back, life." The meeting was held in the damp basement of a Unitarian church. The air smelled of stale coffee and impending grief. It was a congregation of the damned and the defiant. Gaunt young men with the purple bruises of Kaposi's sarcoma blooming like violent flowers on their faces. Furious women in leather jackets with arms crossed like shields. and a handful of parents like her, their eyes wide with a specific, hollow terror. "The government is letting us die," said a man named David. He looked less like a man and more like a skeleton draped in denim, his cheekbones threatening to pierce his skin. "There are drugs in Europe, in Mexico, drugs that actually work, but the FDA is sitting on them while we rot." Sarah listened, her heart hammering against her ribs. She learned about the buyers clubs, whispered underground networks smuggling unapproved hope across borders. Ribavirin, isoprinosine, peptide T. The names sounded like magic spells. "I need something for my son," Sarah said. She tried to be strong, but her voice fractured, trembling with the exhaustion of watching her child fade away. "The AZT. It's killing him faster than the virus." David turned his gaze to her. He took in the floral dress, the sensible Midwestern shoes, the look of a mother who made casseroles and went to PTA meetings. A slow smile spread across his face, a grimace of teeth and tragedy. "You got a car, Mom?" "I have a station wagon," she whispered. "You willing to drive to Tijuana?" Sarah didn't breathe. She didn't blink. The fear that had paralyzed her for months suddenly hardened into something cold and sharp. "Tell me where to go," she said. "I'll drive anywhere."